So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to paint this watercolor birthday cake in Procreate. The technique here is very easy, and I'll list all the brushes I'm using for this in the description below. And as you can see, I've already got the sketch placed in here, and you can have this for free. I'll put a link in the description. I've just placed it up here as the very top layer. I set it to multiply, and then I lowered the opacity just so I can barely see it. And then to start painting, I'll make sure I'm working on a blank layer down here. And the first thing I'm going to paint are going to be the layers within the cake. So for that, I'm going to use the smooth dry round brush in a pretty light kind of yellowy orange tone. And these are all going to be stroke based, so I'm just going to do kind of one stroke per layer. And I'll repeat the same thing for each layer, just shifting the color each time. And then also, I'll try to sort of overlap them in some areas, and then in other areas leave a gap. This just makes it more interesting. Next, I'm going to do a little bit of blending wherever the layers sort of overlap. So for that, I'm going to switch to the water blender, and I'll turn off the sketch for now, and I'll just use it like this. And this could be fine, but I think I want to add some more colors to it. So if you want to do that, I think it's best to do it with the selection tool set to freehand. And as an example, I'll just select this area like that. I'll feather it out, and then I'll mess with the hue, saturation, and brightness. And I'll do this a few more times, just randomly on these layers. After that, I want to straighten some of these edges so they line up better with the sketch. So I'll turn the sketch back on, and instead of just erasing it to follow the sketch, I think I'll use the liquify tool. And you can copy my settings here, just make sure it's set to push. And I'll just kind of push the edges back so they line up better. And once I'm happy with how these layers look, I can move on and do the buttercream. And that'll be on a separate layer. And how I like to do this is I'll use a sort of dark, warm gray tone like this, and then we'll shift it later on to the correct color. For the brush, I'm going to use the medium quill, and I'll just do my best to fill this out in one stroke. And the whole thing is pretty simple, but up here, there's a little bit of a trick. So I left this area blank because this is going to be sort of like a highlight, and I want to soften this transition. So to do that, I'll switch to the water blender again, and I'll just smooth it out like this. And once the buttercream is filled out and blended like this, we can fix the colors. And I think it's easier to do that if I turn off the sketch. Then I'll go to my hue, saturation, and brightness, and I'll just mess with this just until this is a sort of barely visible warm gray tone. And with watercolor, it's always a challenge because we're painting on a white background. And this is just kind of a slightly off white, and it can be a little bit hard to see. So if you want to increase the contrast, I recommend darkening the edge. So for that, I'll use the freehand selection tool, and I'll just sort of go along here and just randomly sort of go across the edge like this, just in a couple places. Then I'll circle back. I'll feather out the selection just a little bit, and then I'll darken it. And this will give us a little bit more contrast. After that, we can move on and do the whipped cream just on the edge here. So I'll turn the sketch back on. And to make this easier, I'm just going to paint one, and then I'll copy it 3 more times. And these will be on their own layer. I'll use the same kind of dark, warm gray tone I used before, but I'm going to use this Shoto brush. And I'll just kind of rough it out like this. Then I'll do some lines like this, just curling around. And then after I've got it sort of in position like that, I'll make a duplicate of it, move the copy over, and then I need to erase where they're overlapping. So I'll select the previous one and just cut it back with the eraser. And I'll repeat this process for the rest of them. And then to finish this up, I'll merge them all together onto one layer, and then I'll do a similar adjustment I did with the buttercream, except this time I'm going to make it a much colder gray tone. And once all the frosting is finished, we can move on and do the sprinkles, and they're going to be on their own layer as well. And for those, I'm just going to use the colored pencil brush and a few different shades of yellow, red, blue, and green. And with the sprinkles finished, we can move on and do the candles. and they'll be on another blank layer. For the brush, I'm going to use the Shoto brush again, and I'll just do 4 candles using the same colors as the sprinkles. And for the tops of the candles, I think it looks nice if I sort of flatten them out, so I'll do that with the eraser brush. And then for the flames, I'm just going to switch back to the smooth dry round, and I'll paint those in using a sort of bright orange tone. It's optional, but if you want, there's a really easy way to add stripes to these candles. So for that, I'm going to grab the freehand selection tool, and I'll just make a kind of zigzag selection like this. Then I'll circle back and use the hue, saturation, and brightness just to kind of brighten those portions. And you can also use the colored pencil brush to add some sparks if you want. And at this point, the illustration could be finished, but I think it can be slightly improved by adding a skew. So first, we need to sort of separate the whole thing onto 2 layers. So I'm going to merge everything related to the cake onto 1 layer, and I'll keep the candles on a separate one. And I'll start by skewing the cake layer first. And for that, I'll use the arrow tool set to distort. And I'm going to use the little green thing here to tip the slice forward a bit, just like that. Then I'll rebalance it by dragging this blue node. And I'm just dragging it until these lines are sort of vertical again. There we go. And this just makes the whole cake slice have a sort of more interesting perspective. And we can do a similar thing to the candles, but I'll do it the other way. And just like that, this illustration is finished. Here's what it looks like when I printed it out as a card, but I think this kind of simple artwork also makes for great stickers or as clip art. As always, if you think I've earned it, please give this video a like. And here are some more simple watercolor tutorials I think you'll love to watch next.